Hello, my name is Tatiana Reed. I currently work on description and documentation of a West Nilotic language Nuer spoken in South Sudan and Ethiopia. In this presentation, I report on the 5 years of online work with speakers of Nuer to show what is possible to achieve when working remotely. I will also put my own two-penny worth to the discussion of where do we go from now in building relationships and refining approaches for collaborating with indigenous communities. I will first give a background on Nuer and its speakers, followed by my own background. I will then take us to the beginning of my online work with the speakers of Nuer. I will talk about finding participants online and organizing community workshops online. I will then describe documentation techniques when working online. And finally, I will speak about where do we go from now. Nuer is a major West Nilotic language spoken in South Sudan and Ethiopia. The language has complex phonology and morphology. Researching a language like Nuer often requires access to good quality recordings to supplement subjective perceptual impressions with instrumental measurements. As for the speakers themselves, there are about 1.7 million of speakers that include a large diaspora around the world. The availability of the diaspora was crucial to my work because as I work with the South Sudanese Nuer dialects, it is easier to access speakers outside of South Sudan because the internet connection and other relevant facilities are underdeveloped in this country. Also, many of the people who live outside of South Sudan, especially in East Africa, have virtually no way of earning a living. So working with me as language consultants is economically viable for them. I came to the academia relatively late, having had a career in community arts and community education. So as an undergraduate student of linguistics, I was naturally drawn to work with language communities. From the outset, my main concern was, what do the language consultants get out of working with me? Of course, there was an element of instant remuneration as I work with the communities where financial remuneration is a norm. But because I saw from early on that the people who were drawn to my projects enjoyed working on the language, I knew that my mission was to see that these people get skills that will enable them to develop professionally. Back when I started working in South Sudan in 2009, I could only work with language consultants when physically present in the field. That meant that there was no continuity. So when I was away from the field, people that I worked with had no way of practicing or implementing the skills that they were learning. All of this changed in 2017 because of the advancements in the global connectivity. And this is where the story has begun. In 2016, I arrived to Kenya to conduct fieldwork with the Nuer diaspora for my PhD. Through word of mouth, I was able to find a number of speakers. One of them, Rebecca, pictured here, became my main consultant. At the time that we met, Rebecca was primary education back in South Sudan and never held a job. Rebecca proved to be an ideal language consultant, clear voice, good of zero range, and a lot of patience. I wanted to continue working with her when it was time to return back home, so I trained her to use my recording equipment, a Marantz recorder and a Shure headset microphone, which I left with her in the field. We started online by continuing with our usual sessions. Rebecca recorded herself and sent the files to me via WeTransfer. At some point, I needed to collect data for a quantitative phonetic study and asked Rebecca to assist with recording speakers. From that time onward, she had been regularly performing research assistant duties, recording over 30 speakers up to date. The way that we work together is as follows. We use Zoom to call each other. Rebecca meets speakers in person. She is responsible for mounting the headset microphone, monitoring recording levels, and for controlling the sound environment in the room, as some sounds that can interfere with the recording are not audible to me via Zoom. I conduct the recording session where I ask people to translate words and sentences from English into Nuer. Where the speaker cannot think of the intended word, Rebecca provides explanation in Nuer without naming the word. I will now play a short video showing how it works. And again? Sorry, there was noise, so we'll re-record it. Could you say it again, please? Okay, great. Now I'm touching the ash. Okay, and again? Great. So the next word is the container for storing grain. Rebecca might need to explain what kind of thing it is. Tree. Yep. And again? Tree. Moving to the question of how to find speakers when working remotely, the last 5 years had taught me that it is entirely possible to find speakers online. To do this, I joined thematic groups on Facebook and place calls describing the nature of work. These posts usually say that I'm looking for a native speaker of language X to record some words and sentences. I then communicate with those who replied by text messages and take it from there. So far, I have been very successful with finding speakers of Nuer and also speakers of other languages, including languages of South Africa and Southeast Asia. In a way, this method of finding speakers is not that different to a situation where you come to a new place and look for speakers online. With internet communication increasingly becoming normality around the world, I find that people do not mind talking online to strangers who show interest in their language. In addition, if you have been working on a language for some time and have some outputs and knowledge that you can share, I'd recommend starting a Facebook group and creating a website. We have done this for Nuer by creating a website called Nuer Lexicon, which is the largest collection of Nuer vocabulary up to date. Here is the sample of how it works. We also started a dedicated Facebook group, which now has 6.2 thousand members following its launch in October 2020. These days, the group is managed jointly by community members and researchers. The website and the Facebook group have been instrumental in finding participants for studies and community workshops. My experience shows that it is also possible to organize community events online. So far, I have had experience of co-organizing an online conference attended by many speakers of East African languages, as well as 5 literacy workshops with speakers of Nuer. These events were running in hybrid mode, online and in person. The in-person participation was achieved by organizing community hubs in East Africa. The hubs provided internet access and were instrumental in ensuring that participants from places with limited internet connectivity were able to access events online. The hubs were provided by organizations in East Africa, some of which I sourced online. For the Nuer Literacy Project, we, myself and my colleagues from the University of Surrey, organized 5 workshops between 2021 and 2022. Each workshop was attended by around 20 participants. Some of them were attending online and some in person at a hub in South Sudan's capital, Juba. For the in-person participation, we had a community leader, a speaker of Nuer who assisted with organizational aspects. Each workshop was around 8 hours in length, including lunch break. The activities alternated between presentations, training, whole group work, and work in small groups. The participants of the workshop produced over 50 books in Nuer, some of which were translations from English and some original stories written by the participants. The resulting books, which will be the first primary level books in Nuer, will be soon printed and distributed to the community. Currently, we're still in the process of copy editing the material. The copy editing team is composed of workshop attendees, and this group meets regularly via Zoom to discuss any issues. In short, my experience shows that it is entirely possible to conduct community meetings online. When using a hybrid model with some participants attending in person, it is best to ensure involvement of community leaders and persons who can manage the logistics of the event. As I said earlier, Rebecca often assists me with recording data in Kenya, but I also work with speakers located in other parts of the world who do not have recording equipment. In such cases, we use Audacity, which is a free software. Of course, this implies that people that I work with must have access to a computer. Prior to sessions, I sent information on how to download Audacity and adjust the settings that would yield the format that I need recordings to be in. Following recording sessions, the speaker send the files to me using WeTransfer, which is also free of charge. These recordings are of good enough quality to be used for the purposes of exemplification. In addition, one of my students used Audacity at his end, which also produced acceptable recordings that he was able to work with. I also use a recording studio in Nairobi that I found online. I use the studio when I need to record good quality data, but the speaker's home is noisy. So far, I used own equipment in such situations, but there is also an option to hire staff who will be able to make recordings using the studio's equipment. And this is what I called outsourced documentation. It is when you hire professionals locally to assist with your recording needs. It is also possible to outsource video documentation. For example, through word of mouth and by Googling online, I was able to find filmmakers in South Sudan. They do all kinds of commission work and are always on the lookout for projects. But in some cases, hiring professionals to do video recordings is not necessary when working online. For online literacy workshops, we used Zoom to record the sessions. We ended up with good quality recordings, such as the one shown here.
Yeah, I'm going to well. Okay. Yeah, well. We know then you will be me. Đang ngoài này được còn nói về pool kia này còn nói về pool mình trả lên kia này còn nói về căn dia liều từ về con quên chara.
In addition, we ask participants to film using their mobile phones. Here is a short video of a participant using his phone to record a video diary. And I especially like the artsy backgrounds.
Chara, workshop mà mới vừa qua. Phong nào cái năng qua mình chết cái nó vẫn nó phong nào par cái thuốc trên cọc kiên vì mà par đua với thuốc trên cọc kiên lép bà phong nào để phê thế especially digital phong nào để phê thế cái thuốc trên cọc kiên.
Now I would like to touch on the question of where do we go from now? In the case of Nuer, we now have a team that is actively involved in all aspects of language description, documentation, and development. For example, 2 members have been involved in creation of written Nuer database. 4 members have been involved in the pre-publication activities such as copy editing and translation. And 2 members are being trained to use speech processing software for data analysis. Our current direction is a community-led approach. Because Nuer's established orthography is modeled on a single dialect and is underrepresentative of other dialects, the community's wish is to see an orthographic reform. And we're now applying for a grant to document and describe all Nuer dialects. This will allow us, the researchers, to provide recommendations that might be used in the future should the community decide to go ahead with reforming the orthography. The role of the researchers on this project will be to train and assist community members with documentation, whilst the data collection will be carried by community members using local knowledge and practices. In general, I see language description and documentation as a collaboration between the community and the academics, with the aim to gradually switch to community-led initiatives. For this to happen, it is crucial that the linguists working with language communities invest in capacity building by training speakers of languages they work with. Importantly, my experience shows that we should not disregard people who don't have prior skills. For example, Rebecca went from being computer illiterate to someone who performs research assistant duties these days. What I'm trying to say is that people without prior skills might have interest in the kind of work that we do and a willingness to learn. We should also pay attention to younger generation who might not be proficient speakers or who don't speak the language at all, but have access to speakers and are technologically minded. Again, going back to Rebecca's example, at the beginning, our training sessions were also attended by her children and nephews who were computer literate and could assist her. These days, Rebecca no longer requires their help. Finally, continuity is the key. And I believe that the availability of internet connectivity in many parts of the world ensures that we can build strong and mutually beneficial relationships with indigenous communities. I would like to thank many individuals and organizations for their continuous support of this work. And thank you everyone for listening to this talk.